Hello and welcome to the Self-Consciousness Podcast. I am your host, Jennifer Way, Intuitive Consultant, and I'm so excited that you are here. As always, this is the fourth and final installment of my series, Feminine Rising, and I am very excited to bring you a special guest today. She goes by the name Tahya. Tahya is a dancer, a teacher, a musician, and amongst all those things, she has also created a modern day version of the sistrum. As someone who is devoted to the Egyptian mysteries and all of the goddesses, shout out Isis, shout out Sekhmet, shout out Hathor. This, and hopefully you're watching this over video, is the Hathor sistrum. And you'll see inside the episode, we actually go by Hathor. So the Hathor sistrum is an instrument that Tahya made. She manufactures it, she sells it on her website. I found her because I was looking for a sistrum because I am that kind of person. And I love this conversation because she really fully embodies divine feminine. She had mentioned to me after we recorded that she really considers herself a simple conduit. And I feel like I want to add that she really is an embodiment of divine feminine. She's bringing divine feminine into form. She's bringing divine feminine into sound, into feeling, into physical movement in the body. And this is such an important part of divine feminine. So we talk about the qualities, we talk a bit about her journey and her trips to Egypt, her inspiration, and of course, I get weird, but you know better. You know to expect this by now. We talk about past life experiences. We talk about how we receive messaging from these goddess energies, and we talk about this almost devotion. I really feel this devotion to these goddesses. I do consider these energies that we access and that they're part of us, and that if we are interested or focused, we can really pull these things through. And these sort of energies come through because at one point on this planet, the divine feminine really was worshipped. So identifying with Egypt or the mysteries, even when you're a white lady from America, there's a very significant reason and a magneticism to it that is very difficult to describe. So we honor the tradition itself, and I really enjoyed this conversation. Stick around. Hope you enjoy. Tahya, welcome to the Self-Consciousness Podcast. I am so happy that you are here. Hello.
Thank you. Greetings. Thank you for inviting me, Jennifer. I'm very happy to be here, and I want to just start off by saying that I'm an American woman of Central European and Irish descent. And so the name Tahya is not the birth name that I was given, but long story short, regarding my journey, I was presented, if you will, the name Tahya. And I loved it because I had been practicing something that really resonated deep within me. And I felt like I was being welcomed to a magic carpet ride. And when I heard this name, that also resonated with me. And I asked what it meant, and I was told it meant greetings or welcome.
Wow.
And so I said, perfect. That's what I want to do. I want to welcome people to this magic carpet ride I'm on. So saying welcome, Tahya, welcome. It's like all one word.
That is really interesting. And I honestly never welcome people that way. So I'll say welcome. I'll usually just say welcome to the Self-Consciousness Podcast, but I was like, nope, say it again. Nope, say it again. So,
you'd think you were intuitive or something.
I know. You'd think you were a little psychic or something. Oh my goodness. I'm so happy. Everybody, welcome to the show. Tahya and I were just talking for a long time before recording, so you're catching us in a good spot. So I talked a little bit about it in the intro, but I want Tahya to describe um, something. This beautiful instrument, and this is, oh, I'm so bad with camera, is called a sistrum. And I found this beautiful instrument by Tahya, who created these and sells them. And I invited her onto the show because of her incredible background and so many parallels, just this love of the Egyptian tradition. Um, so, Tahya, you awaken divine feminine strengths using ancient tradition rhythms, mudra, and movements, and making them relevant in the 21st century. I want you to tell us a little bit about how you do that and why you do that.
Where do I start? How or why?
I know. I
Um,
always do that. I layer the questions up.
I'm going to start with why, because as I said, with regards to finding this name for myself along the way, I found that the practices that I began to learn, thanks to being beckoned by hypnotic rhythms and intoxicating melodies from countries throughout the Middle East, opened up both my interior creative spirit, it opened it up, it helped it blossom, and it also stimulated my mind to go in search of more and more and more. And so that more or less is why I do what I do, because it's just been so interesting. And it has led me to meeting so many fabulous people. I am exceedingly blessed by the people that have come into my life as a result of walking down this path. And I also practice all these different mudra and movements and rhythms and food and poetry. I mean, it's just like once I took a dive into this well, I discovered it was incredibly deep. And so that's why I do all of this.
You came to this through dance. Is that
Mhm,
is that safe to say? So
mhm.
originally you started off as a dancer and basically and also a teacher.
I always loved to dance.
Mhm.
And yet, I was not built to a ballerina's size. I have always been full figured, sometimes more so than others.
Same.
But even as a young girl, I was chunky. And I'd be up in my room dancing away. I mean, I just loved to dance. I also loved to sing, and I played guitar, and I emulated being, now I'm dating myself, but Joni Mitchell was my hero, Judy Collins was my hero, and I'd constantly be practicing in my room, singing their songs, trying to hit the notes that they hit. And then other times I'd be bopping around and dancing. And at that time where I was living, the only dance classes that were available were ballet. And so I went through my youth exploring my creative spirit by myself in my room. And then, luckily, in my late teens, I heard what I now know was Egyptian music. I didn't know it at the time, but I heard Egyptian music, and the whole rhythm of the doom doom da doom da, I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
And I wanted to know how to move to it. It just really awakened something inside of me that I had to go in search of the dance. And then once I found what the movements were related to these rhythms and this music, and also was taught that these movements dated back to ancient millennial cultures in which women who were full figured were revered for their childbearing qualities. I was like, oh, where do I get the lifetime membership? I was just so excited. So as I was telling you earlier, I just realized that I'm celebrating my 50th anniversary of being a participant in these arts. And so apparently my wish came true. I did indeed get the lifetime membership.
I would even go to say past lifetime membership
Well,
as
and then
well.
there's that.
Of
And then
course,
there's
we're going to
that
go there.
because,
Yeah.
I have to say that more often than not, I will explain to people that it doesn't make any sense to me being an American woman growing up in a Irish household, Irish Catholic household, where the body was basically cut off from any pleasure whatsoever. My parents didn't even hardly ever hug us. I felt their love. I definitely felt their love, and I had a great relationship with my parents, but they weren't tactile really. And so I once I heard that music, and it like it was like a shock wave in my system when I heard it. And then I totally changed directions. Like, I wanted to be a singer. I was going to try and get a job in a recording studio, be a backup singer. Like, I had this grand plan. And I totally took a left turn and started to look into learning about this dance. And so I would often say to people, I must have some past life experience that was awakened when I heard that music, because I can't explain it any other way.
Oh wow. I so when did you discover Hathor? That's kind of another
Oh,
question there. Yeah.
yeah, that's a good one. So I'm going to pronounce it differently
Hathor.
because it's spelled Hathor. So we want to say in English, Hathor. We want to
Yeah.
make the TH a th sound. However, as you know, looking at the hieroglyphs, it's actually that she is the house of Horus. There are a lot of interpretations of what house means, but for now, we'll just leave it as house or home of
Mhm.
Horus. And so that's the hot. So hot is the house, and Hor is for Horus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I say Hathor.
Hathor. Yes.
Hathor.
So I'll just go there. I'll go weird. I'll be the one. Um, when a lot of my Egyptian stuff started, I'll just say coming online is the best way to express it.
Mm,
And people who listen to the show will know by now. This is the kind of stuff I talk about. But I had a lot of memories coming on, and
mm,
I had a lot of clairaudient messages coming down in how to hold the body, how to move the body, how to breathe and do everything and chant while doing movement. And I hadn't ever learned any of those things. So chants were coming through, things like that were coming through.
mm,
But the pronunciation of Hathor came through recently as Atur. And so that's
mm,
kind of like, so I hear you. And a lot of other sort of words have come through in terms of like yisis, or sehmet,
mm,
like, and I know it's difficult for maybe some people to understand, but a lot of my Egyptian knowledge, not only does it come from a teacher, but it also comes from something else that's very hard to explain. And I do feel it is a connection that I've had before, but it's very much intuitively brought into my body, and I
mm.
can't explain it.
Right.
But so that's why I'm just fascinated by your journey, and kind of even just going through that sort of classical way of really starting with the rhythm and the music and the body movement. I think what maybe history doesn't, because you're also a researcher with all of this, maybe what history doesn't really say is that there was so much about movement and breath and rhythm that we can't necessarily bring forward or uncover archaeologically, but you can only do it through feeling or an ancient memory, I guess.
Right. Well, and part of it too is because so much of it was handed down in an oral tradition that unless you have the good fortune of finding a teacher who's a part of that lineage, it's just not common knowledge. It should be.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure that also has a lot to do with, the patriarchal
I was just gonna say, yep, patriarchy.
overarch.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
without going down that road at this time,
Yeah.
um, I'll go back to how I was introduced to her. And I'm sure there were a lot of different ways that she was making an effort to come through to me. But so first of all, for example, again, I mean, so many people would say, "Oh, you have to go to Egypt." And there was this part of me that because I felt like I definitely had some connection to a previous lifetime, I always felt like I don't need to go to Egypt. I've been there, I've done that. Like right now, I really want to get to Turkey because I'm really interested in the poetry of Rumi. And I think it would be really interesting to walk around where he walked, that kind of thing. And a friend of mine kind of tapped me on the shoulder one day and said, and she had invited me other times. She had been to Egypt like 12 times.
Whoa.
So maybe on her 10th trip, she asked me to go along. And I was like, nah, I don't need to go. It's okay. I've got some past life experience there. So I can check that one off.
Already done that.
Yeah. And then the 12th trip that she invited me yet again to come, she enticed me by saying, this trip, we're going out into the desert and we're drumming with the Bedouins. And I was like, oh, well, now I gotta go. and I did. And so it was very spontaneous. I think it was less than 2 weeks when she mentioned it. And then I was on a plane and I was going.
Oh my God.
And I'll tell you one of the cool things. It's really hard for me to be abbreviated in all of this because there's just so much.
No need to be abbreviated.
Okay, cool. So that was in the like maybe January or February. And the summer before that, so that I think that would have been 2006. I think I went to Egypt in 2007. So the summer of 2006, she and I had been to the Metropolitan Museum to see the 100th anniversary of the Metropolitan Museum's Department of Egyptian Antiquities. Yeah. It was the 100th anniversary of that department. And front and center, they don't do this anymore, I'm sorry to say, but there was a huge banner hanging out front of the Metropolitan Museum, and it was Hatshepsut. And so we went to the exhibit, and now fast forward to she invites me to Egypt, and I pulled out my coffee table book from the collection of Hatshepsut. And I'm sure you can relate to this. I basically said to the book, tell me what I need to know.
Yeah.
And I let it just open up. It's like this big, it's like that thick, and it's, a coffee table size book. So there's a lot of information that it could have told me. But what it opened to was the Chapelle Rouge at Karnak, at the Luxor, area.
Yeah.
So it didn't have a picture, but it described a procession of women holding sistrum. And I knew about the sistrum because Lane Redman had talked about it in her book, When the Drummers Were Women, which anybody who's listening, you must have this book in your hands. There's so much great information there. And a lot of what I had been taught about traditions that had been handed down in an oral tradition were actually now in print. So I totally love that book, and I am endlessly dedicated and devoted to what Lane shared with us. She's no longer here. She passed over several years ago. But anyway, so I had read about Hathor in her book. I had read about Dendera in her book. I had seen the word sistrum, and I had read that at Dendera, there is a hallway where 32 women are depicted processing holding frame drums, and 29 women are processing holding sistrum.
Getting chills.
And yeah,
Yeah.
and the first time I read that, I just thought, wow, that sounds really amazing that it's even carved into a wall at a temple, all these women playing percussion in procession. um so I knew about it, and then the book for Hatshepsut's commemoration opened to describing a wall at Hatshepsut's Chapelle Rouge depicting women holding the sistrum. And I was like, well, if I'm going to be in Egypt, I got to see that.
Yes.
And there was no picture of it. It was just it was just a paragraph about it. So I did make it part of my mission while I was on that trip to get there and see that wall. And for those of you that have not ever traveled to Egypt, or to the temple complex at Karnak, it's not like there's a legend saying, if you're looking for this, walk down this path and then turn left, and then you just have to like basically put your antenna up and
Yeah.
hope you find it. So that's kind of how it got started. So I saw the wall on the Chapelle Rouge of women processing holding the sistrum, took pictures of it, not, just basically as a tourist
Yeah.
and an enthusiast with no, agenda. And then we did get to Dendera, and I was determined to see the hallway with the procession of percussion players
That was described in the book.
that Lane described.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Oh.
again, it was very difficult because I had no idea where it was. I mean, she had said the Mammoth or the birthing chapel or something like that, but it just, we also were in an extremely limited time frame. Our tour, for whatever reason, only allowed us about 30 minutes at this monstrous temple complex. Now, because you're asking me about Hathor and her making herself known to me, shall we say, upon reaching Dendera, again, I had a vision, I had a plan, I really wanted to see that hallway. And I was astonished at the enormity of the temple complex. I mean, it's the temple is big, the grounds are big, there are several structures there. So I round the corner, I lay eyes on the front of the temple, and I uncontrollably began to cry. Tears welled up. I couldn't stop it. They were just flowing. I practically lost my balance. I almost fell to my knees. I had an experience there that I could not put words to. I couldn't explain to anybody. But I think I definitely had a moment of feeling home and being welcomed home.
Wow.
And I really feel that was when and where I really had the strongest connection to Hathor
Wow.
and was initiated. I think I was initiated or reinitiated.
Yeah. you know, when you said you were crying, it's like I I feel you, because there are moments when I am in meditation or I try to connect with Hathor energies or Sekhmet energies or Isis energies, and I sob, and I don't know why. And I'm
Yeah.
hadn't been sad about anything or anything like that.
Right.
And the only way I can explain it is this recognition of utter devotion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, but I don't think of myself as like a religious fanatic, but I
Right.
am, and I will say this out loud in front of people, I am devoted to them. Like I am devoted to the lady, the goddess. I
Right.
really, and it brings me to tears with so much love because it's so much love.
Right. Right.
I love I love this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
have
my
not
heart
been to
is like my
Egypt.
heart is swelling as you say that, the
Yeah.
whole, and in fact there's a phrase from the Papyrus of Ani that says her initiates go forth at dawn and wash their hearts with joy. And that's how I feel right now. Just you and I talking about this is flooding my heart and making it swell with
Me too.
joy. So
Me too.
I did find the wall. It's actually a hallway, again, where there's the priestesses with frame drums and the priestesses with sistrum, and was very excited, fast and furiously, took a couple pictures, and then we had to leave. And it was so frustrating. I never even actually got into the main temple, if you can believe it,
Yeah.
because I was so determined to see this thing, and I only had 30 minutes to find it. So I do sometimes wonder if I'll have the good fortune to return and maybe shimmer my sistrum at Dendera. Um, then what happened is,
You're reading my mind. I'm like, then,
so I,
yes.
so that was all very interesting and obviously a powerful experience. My friends were not around me when it happened. They had all chosen to use the restroom before proceeding into the temple complex, of the grounds of the temple complex.
Everyone had their own release.
Yes.
Sorry, I
So
had to put that in
so
there.
it was just a very private experience for me.
Yeah.
Anyway, I returned to my home, and a couple weeks later, I I was looking online trying to find a sistrum because I had seen it over and over. It's depicted at the temple dedicated to Isis in Philae. It's depicted at Edfu. It's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's at Abydos. It's everywhere. And so I was like, well, I have got to get me one of those.
Yeah.
I've got frame drums, I've got, tambourines, I've got finger cymbals.
Yeah.
I want one of those. They were played by the women.
Yeah.
So I couldn't find one. I couldn't find one except on museum shelves. And I thought that was a bloody shame and gave up. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, um, I was awakened kind of at the call to prayer time
Yeah.
with kind of a big come.
Boing. Yep.
And I really feel as though I was told
Mm-hmm.
by Hathor herself that it was my purpose to reemerge the sistrum. And, I couldn't go back to sleep, needless
Yeah.
to say. I'm like, what? Why me? What I do? How am I supposed to do this? And then I just sort of ruminated on it for a minute or two, and I realized that, like, all the time that I had been, also studying and playing the frame drum. This, for example, is a frame drum that was designed by Glenn Velez, the master of frame drumming, in basically considered the father of frame drumming at this point, not because he invented it, but because he made it accessible to
Okay.
so many people,
Yeah.
that he's sort of considered, the father of this movement around the world. And so he has drums that are made by Cooperman frame drums. And I also was very good friends with the djembe drum designer, Paolo Mattioli, for the Remo Manufacturing Company. So I'm like, oh, well, I know people who are doing design with drums, with drum manufacturers. So that's got to be part of the gateway,
Yeah.
especially the Cooperman people, because this is birch, and
Mm-hmm.
they have figured out how to bend this wood, and obviously the sistrum needed to have somebody who could bend wood to create the hoop top.
Yeah.
And so I went to my teachers. I started with Glenn, and I said, I might have even started with Remo, because I knew that Cooperman hand makes everything, and I didn't know if they'd be interested in taking on a project like this. So I started with Remo because they were a slightly bigger company,
Mm-hmm.
and Remo said no. And so then I went to Cooperman, and bless their hearts, they took on the challenge. They thought it was interesting, and ultimately, they now, meanwhile, years are going by because I'm visualizing what it's going to look like. I'm not an artist. And so I was talking to different people, asking them to draw things. And I'd say, no, it needs to, looks like this. And anyway, so it was a long and windy road. And here she
And here
is.
she is. It just feels so good.
Doesn't
It
it
feels
feel nice?
so
Yeah, the
good.
design is so good. I know. I'm so
And,
happy with
you
it.
know, and I don't know if I told you this. Well, I'm not a musician, first of all, but I had gotten a sistrum from someone in Egypt. This like a basically where I get like all my statues from. It's on Etsy, on Rise. They're on Instagram. Follow them, and I had gotten I guess it was a copper one. Well, I have it over there. It's on my Instagram, and I love the look of it, and it's very heavy, but I
Hmm.
but it didn't have an impact with the sound. I was
Hmm.
like it felt, and I loved it, but I was like I knew it was a beautiful piece for my altar, and it was to be
Yeah.
nice and decorative, but I was like it doesn't have the sound that I need. And
Hmm.
I'm like, why do I need, not even asking myself, why do I need the sound? I don't know, because I just need the sound. And when this came, oh, I just, it just hits you, it just like hits you in the heart. And I really hope any other listeners can identify. I mean, by this point, I'm assuming that everybody understands like the connection with Egypt and, but there is this, it really is about the feeling. And, if we're talking about divine feminine, it's the feeling of something, and a sound vibration is going to affect that. It's going to be a huge
Right.
factor in it.
Right.
Um, so you had it made, you had it developed and manufactured. And so how long did that process take from I guess your first sort of talking to that company and the final product?
Well, again, it really started with, yeah, talking to my teachers and saying, do you think somebody would be interested? And then they encouraged me. Both Paolo and Glenn encouraged me. And so then I realized, well, I can't just go talk to the company. I have to be able to present something to them. So it took a while to come up with the design. And I specifically made a point, let's see, it's a little
Oh
blurry,
yeah.
but I
Yeah,
really
sure.
wanted this design of the handle to
Yeah.
include this image of the goddess because I had seen it.
Let's see.
Oh, yeah, yours is much better.
Here
That's
we
much better.
go. I also recommend everyone go to the YouTube video. You can see this on Spotify or on YouTube. Please
Thank
just go
you.
watch it.
So,
Yeah.
and at Tahya.com
And Tahya.com.
and
We'll
Tahya.com.
definitely get to that.
Well, anyway, so
Yeah.
I had seen this instrument that was housed at the Louvre that belonged to a chantress by the name of Hanut Awi. And I just loved the image that was on the handle. And so I was working with an artist to replicate that visual, which is perfect. I mean, it really is
It really
beautiful.
is.
So, I did all that. So the long story short is that surprise, surprise, it took 7 years. Not 3, not
Yeah.
5,
Yeah.
7.
Yeah. I mean, stick with your dreams, everybody.
Right,
Seriously.
right. And don't think something's going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
And I can't even believe that it was that long, because it was so much fun pursuing this passion that I really didn't notice the passing of time.
Yeah.
However, if I showed you some of the original prototypes, I'd be like, oh no, that's not what I was talking about. So it was definitely a process. And then basically after it was manufactured, and that was also an interesting process. I ultimately, after Cooperman was so kind to hold my hand on the journey and come up with a prototype, they finally said, you know what, we don't want to do this. But they created a prototype for me.
Yeah. Oh,
So
wow.
then I was able to go to the next manufacturer, which ended up being, of all things at that time, their name was Mid-East Manufacturing.
Oh, wow. Of course.
Right? I
Yeah.
know. So, and it was really, really sweet because I got to meet with the president of the company, and it turns out the company was originated by his mother and father, because his mother was a belly dancer. And she wanted to have finger cymbals and other percussion instruments related to the dance available to her class participants. And it just grew into this business that his parents then gave to him, and so on and so forth. They're now called Ensoul, Ensoul, Ensoul Music. But at any rate, when I met with him, I didn't know anything about pitching a product.
Yeah.
But I went there with all my heart and soul, and had a beautiful prototype. And I just said, he was like, well, who would want one of these? And I just said, I can't imagine in all of my experience with the dance, with drumming, with meeting women who are interested in celebrating the goddess and worshiping the goddess. I said, there's no way I'm the only one that wants one of these. So for me, it was kind of like, if you build it, they will come.
Yeah. Totally.
And he took a chance. And here we are. And that was, now that was like 7 years ago. But I want to say, you mentioned getting a copper
Yeah.
instrument from Egypt.
Yeah.
When I was there, they were not selling them anywhere.
Wow.
So I think it's very interesting that since I made all this effort, that people are kind of like, oh, maybe we should sell these to the tourists.
Yes, because there's a lot of white women in America who want these things. No,
Right, right.
A lot of white women with past life memories of Egypt who really want these things.
Right.
But
however, mine is still the most beautiful.
Yours really is the most beautiful. So obviously the artisans in Egypt ain't got nothing on you. Just kidding. I shouldn't say that, because literally the artisan who made that one found me on Instagram. Because I posted a photo of it, and I'm not good with social media, and you expertly put in hashtags, and I was like, yes, thank you for hashtagging me, because I need to do that. And I think because I'm also connected to the guy who I bought it from, the Onurais, the actual artisan found me and messaged me. He's like, and he wrote a message. He was like, that was really hard to make. I was like, oh my God.
Well,
thank
you,
Ahmed.
I need to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to send you his profile, because I was like, oh, so now I'm friends with the guy who made it. But I could see, so he's got you can see some of the ones that he's making on there, but now I can, you can get in touch with him.
I will say, when I first came back, there were a handful, and I mean that, like less than 5, maybe, that were available, that were being handcrafted. But some of them were just like maybe 5 inches big.
Yeah.
And they really didn't, the facial expression of the goddess was unappealing to me. And I was like, no, this is not what I saw carved on the temple walls. I
Yeah.
mean, there are some ancient artifacts on museum shelves that are smaller in stature. Mine is 16 inches tall,
Yeah.
which was informed by seeing King Tut's
Mm,
sistrum, the sistrum
that's
that were
right.
found in his tomb,
Yes.
were easily 18 inches tall, or maybe even 20 inches tall. They were quite big. And the ones that I saw carved on the temple walls, the women were holding it like, in front of them. And it easily, like, they might have had it at shoulder level, and it easily
Yeah.
came up to like their, at least where their eyes were. And I was like, these were not small. So
Yeah.
maybe there were some small ones, but also at the time I was doing performances at outdoor venues, a sculpture garden, Mayfair Festival of the Arts in a big park. And I wanted to play this, and I wanted it to have a robust sound. I
Yeah.
also had a vision of, like, processing through the temple courtyards one day, holding the sistrum with other women. I needed it to be, I wanted it to be robust. Now,
Yeah.
I will say that it's so robust that I've had many inquiries about how to change out the jingles. Like, is there
Oh.
a way to change these out that I don't have to have so
No.
many all the time? And
No.
I'm so lucky that I have a manufacturer that makes this one for me,
Yeah.
that variations will happen when, there's some major tipping point and they're willing to make a different model.
Yeah.
We're not there yet.
Well, I think even, I don't know why this is coming into my head, but like, I think even if you wanted to, you could create a sort of almost like you see on a microphone, like
Mm-hmm.
a little thin disc of foam that would have
Yes.
like a circle, little slit,
Mm-hmm.
and a hole in the
Mm-hmm.
middle. That if they
Mm-hmm.
needed the sound to be, you could
Somewhat
slide it
muffled.
in and
Yeah.
then pinch it. Maybe there's like a little clasp or something, and
Mm-hmm.
then they don't have to freak out about it. And then you
Right.
can sell that to them for extra.
Right. Well, that's a good idea. And certainly it's something that also would benefit finger cymbal players, because sometimes,
Yeah.
you don't want to play your finger cymbals and annoy everybody that you're living with. So being able to muffle the sound would be good.
Yeah.
But the other thing I discovered is, rather than, playing like that, like
Yeah.
getting all the jingles to come upon the rim, you can
Yeah.
also turn it and play it this way.
Yes. Yes. And I just want to
And I
point.
love that.
Yeah,
It's
I know.
so subtle and
I
beautiful.
know.
So yeah.
I I want to say a couple of things. I think originally they needed to be loud because everything with the temples and the sound was built around sound and vibration.
Mm.
Everything was meant for amplification. So to have an amplified sound coming from this instrument is very important right now. We and I will say this. This is just like, now I feel like talking to you is just bringing back so many memories that we're just making now. But like, there needed to be an amplification. Ancient Egypt was a denser time. There needed to be a high amplification. And I feel like that's something that is just, if you're outside and you're in procession and you've got all these people, of course you're going to need, and the sound maybe coming from the temple before they're coming outside, that feeling, that sound, of moving
I
through
think it
that
actually was
temple.
the other way. I
Oh,
think
going
that,
in.
yeah, it was a
Oh,
it was
no
a
way.
ceremonious procession through the
Yeah.
courtyard that everyone was able to observe and participate.
And then moving into the
And
temple.
then and also, that included harps and probably a flute, um, and drums and cymbals and clackers and the sistrum.
Yeah.
And then the only instrument that ultimately made it to the innermost sanctuary was the voice and the sistrum.
Wow.
All the others
And then
stayed
everything would
outside.
kind of die down as
Mhm. And so that's why I
that's
also love that there are two ways to play this, and the one is to, as I said, kind of have it with the face forward, which is
Mhm.
a beautiful thing,
Yeah.
and then just gently flicking the wrist.
Yeah.
So that would have been the more subtle sound, maybe, that was in the interior of the
Yeah.
sanctuary, as opposed to,
Yeah.
as part of the processional.
This is so exciting because everyone's getting like a taste over the sound of the rhythm, and
Did it come through? Good.
it did come through. And I what I want to add is and we'll obviously go through your contact information and everything, but Tahya has she's got videos that are instructional showing you how to play it and also how to do movements with it. Oh, yes. And we've got some drums underneath playing. And she also, along with the sistrum itself, you can also purchase like a completely informational video. It's like a documentary, basically, and an informational packet that it contains so much research. Now I talk about Egyptian history in terms of memory, not in terms of actual history, but she has basically compiled the true history, the true research. She's done the research, and all the information is it's really dense, and it's such a wonderful complement
Thank you.
to the instrument, I have to say. And and you're also teaching classes. Are you so currently at this time, what do you offer and sort of practice as a teacher, as a guide? What are you up to?
Well, thank you for mentioning all of those things. I
Yeah.
have to say, my research is ongoing. It's
Hmm.
still part of that deep dive into a very deep well, and it's completely fascinating and so much fun. And even though I have recorded one presentation, I'm definitely working on an extended version because
Mm.
there's a
Oh
lot
yeah.
more information that I've discovered that I think is really fun for us to learn. So, for example, one of the things we know about Hathor is that she was the goddess of women and beauty. And
Mhm.
so I have some really fun examples of how women adorned themselves. And I think that's important because I think, especially having gone through a long period of isolation due to COVID, a lot of us have maybe become, uh, I don't want to use
Complacent.
the word lazy,
Yeah.
but uninspired,
Mm.
uninspired
Yeah.
to adorn ourselves with eyeliner and, earrings and whatever, because we're home.
Mhm.
And I know I have done that myself on more than one occasion, that
Yes.
it's just easier not to do all of that, to just dive into my research and not worry about how I look today. But there's something about the ritual of adornment that also is in tribute to the goddess. And that is uplifting, and so you not only look better, but you feel better because you have gone through that process of uplifting your spirit. So there are different examples of that in my extended version and other interesting things. So I have a whole nother presentation that's like on the horizon.
I love that.
Meanwhile, what I'm doing with my classes, uh, I offer classes online, and I have great visions of what I would like to do with my online classes because of the opportunity that Zoom has presented all of us to connect with people beyond our immediate neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited. I've taught some frame drum, introduction to frame drum. I am not a master frame drummer, but I am definitely skilled at being able to introduce people to the rhythms, to the techniques of playing the frame drum.
Yeah.
And I love doing that because this is a part of our history. It's part of
Yeah.
her story
Yeah.
as women. And we played the drum in ancient times, and so many women are picking up the drum in the 21st century. It is a beautiful thing to witness around the world. There's actually a Facebook group called Frame Drumming Women, and it was created by a devotee of Lane Redmond's, and it's beautiful because there's women all over the world that participate in that conversation. So my vision for my online classes is to keep that going, to keep bringing women into the experience of holding a drum and feeling the power of, well, being empowered to play the drum and to remember when we played these rhythms in different phases of the moon cycles, and the different seasons, and in celebration of various goddesses, but overall in celebration of the divine feminine. So I offer an online introduction to frame drumming, and ultimately all of what I apply to the drum can be applied to the Egyptian tambourine known as the rick. It can also be applied to finger cymbals, and it can be applied to the sistrum. Once you get these rhythms in you and in your body, they can be applied to different things. So I do that. And then locally, most people around here seem to want to have an in-person class. I personally love doing living room Zoom. I don't have to worry about parking the car. I
Yeah.
don't have to worry about the elements. But
Yeah.
I have not found my people for my online Zoom classes yet.
Okay.
Um, so I love also introducing the movements that were a part of these traditions that women practiced, again, under the different phases of the moon, during the different cycles of the seasons. And, we circle and we spiral and we do beautiful hand movements, all in celebration of our femininity. And that is just so powerful. It is just such a privilege for me to be able to share what I have learned about celebrating the creative spirit and our femininity. Now, I don't want to sound exclusive to women. Certainly, men are welcome to explore their creativity and their feminine side. Um, while at the same time, I'm a woman celebrating my feminine sensuality. And so that's the place that I'm coming from. And because, as I said earlier, coming from a background of growing up in a very strict Irish Catholic household, being able to express my femininity and my sensuality was so liberating that it is just pure pleasure for me to welcome others to that experience. So that's what my goal is in my classes. Now, I have women who come into my classes. Right now, I have a couple women of Syrian heritage. I have another woman of Moroccan heritage. And they grew up with some of these movements as part of family
Yeah.
celebrations. And hopefully they also grew up with, Grandmother's Secrets. One of my
Yeah.
favorite books is a story of a woman, a memoir of a woman talking about how her grandmother taught her these movements in recognition of her femininity and sensuality. Again, I didn't have that upbringing. Nevertheless, because I have spent such a long time being devoted to these arts, and because I also practice mudra, I have, really nice hand gestures that go along with everything. So even though they grew up with it,
Yeah.
they don't necessarily have a vocabulary for the movement. They don't necessarily know maybe how to construct a dance if they want to do something special for friends. And so having been a dancer and a big part of the dance community here for a long time, I've really learned uh, how to make all of this accessible.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean you are I mean this is a perfect last in our series, but you are bringing divine feminine into form, and
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
only into instrumental form but physical form. And it's such an important part of divine feminine. It's your I had a download once that because I was feeling guilty about not doing enough yoga, and I got it very very clearly: yoga's for masculine. And now I'm not saying it's only for men, it's for anyone strengthening their masculine,
Hmm.
you know, female, male, non-binary, what
Right.
have you. But that dance was for feminine. And I was like, oh yeah. So then I had a vision where I was doing those movements, sort of belly, spiraling, snake, and I was able to see inside of my body, and I could see the pelvis almost functioning like almost like an upside down umbrella, right? Like the cup, the umbrella sort of being the spine. Um, and that sort of moving the hips and really focusing on swirling that energy. And then what I saw, and I was like, that's where kundalini comes from, that's where the
Hmm.
snake image comes from,
Hmm.
because then I saw it literally move around my spine, lighting up each part of my spine as the energy kind of circulated it. And then it all like hit me that that's an extremely important part of divine feminine. And if and the adornment, it's so hard with when we talk about the feminine or feminism in modern times, to not have so much weight attached to what's feminist and what's not feminist, because divine feminine is something completely different. It's the earth, it's the mother, it's the creation, it's the destruction, it's the mystery, it's all of those things. And bringing that out for people, which you are doing, is just such a it's such a it, I just hope for anyone listening and watching, it's like you can relax into this, knowing that you exist, that this exists, that these movements are there for us. They're there for the feminine. They're
Hmm.
there to strengthen us, to really help us embody the goddess. And you're doing it so beautifully with
Thank you.
your with everything that you've got out there. And I just love that there's something tangible there, that
Yeah,
something
that
you
took
can
me a long
hold.
time. I mean, it was such a gift. It was such a gift from the goddess because, I would go to holistic expos and I would, be introducing myself to people and handing out flyers about my classes. And for whatever reason, I mean, you name it, women have 101 reasons that they can't dance, and
So
especially
true.
not belly dancing.
Yeah.
They're too young, they're too old, they're too fat, they're too skinny. I mean, you name it,
Yeah.
they're not meant for this. And I'm like, it's meant for every body.
Yeah. Yes.
Release your preconceived ideas about thinking you have to look like Barbara Eden from I Dream of Jeannie.
Oh God,
That's
right.
not what this is about. But
Yeah.
they wouldn't believe it. They wouldn't believe me. They were like, nope.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's been really fun, Jennifer, because I finally had an opportunity to work with a gynecologist, and everybody came to the events because they wanted to hear what she had to say. And she was like, well, they're going to get a taste of you. They need to
Oh
know.
my God, that's
And
perfect.
and so, these women would be sitting there like, I'm not here to dance.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And so I started out by reciting some Rumi, because that's a whole nother program. But,
Yeah.
I started out just by reciting the first Rumi poem that also struck a very deep chord in me, where I couldn't believe that he said these words, in the 13th century, and they resonated so deeply with me. I hear a drum. I hear a drum in my soul's ear, coming from the depths of the stars. And that drum sound rises on the air. Its beat, my heart. A voice inside the drum says, I know you are tired, but come, this is the way.
Oh, wow.
And so now they're kind of,
Yeah.
it's right. Wow.
Yeah.
And then in these presentations, now these women, I kind of have them in the palm of my hand.
Yeah.
Because that's a beautiful poem.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to me. I heard the hypnotic rhythm and it beckoned me.
Yeah.
And so I say that, and then I beckon them. We do a few mudra.
Yeah.
And then I invite them to stand up. And by now, they feel safe with me.
Yes.
So I do a few shoulder rolls.
I know.
And we move on.
That's how you do it, everybody.
And that's how we do
That's
it.
how we do it. I mean, that's the other thing. It's like we live in such a masculine focused world. Everyone's hips are locked up.
Right.
In so many ways, physically, emotionally, spiritually.
And we're so
it's so
disconnected. We're so up here all the time.
Yeah.
With our phones, with our computers. We are, and it's been this way for a long time now, that we're so disconnected from the lower chakras that it's just, again, it's just such a privilege to be able to help get women and my class participants reacquainted with the energy centers in the lower part of the body. And then, like you said, be able to start spiraling it up.
Yeah.
And down and up and get everything juicy.
Yes. I love it. Oh, Tahya. Okay. So I really feel like I could sit and talk to you for another half an hour.
You
But
say that to
I
all
do. No, I do, because it's true.
I know
I
you have
bring people on.
fascinating guests, and I'm so honored to be here.
It's literally just an excuse to be like, can we talk for a really long time? And I
great.
just,
Thank you.
anything, like, for me, this is my warm and squishy place. I want my world to be warm and squishy. So that's how I want everything. Where can people find you?
Oh, it's so easy because I managed to get my domain name at the very onset
Nice.
of the whole everybody having a computer scene.
Yeah.
And so it's tahya.com.
Okay. And the spelling for everyone, that's TAHYYA.com.
So it's 5 letters,
Yes.
TAHYA, tahya.com.
And I will put that down below. And I will also have that in our show notes. So Tahya, thank you
Nice
so
to meet you,
much.
Jennifer.
I know, this was so nice.
To be continued.
To be continued. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening.
Yes.